The accounting firm of Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skia presents the 28th College Football Hall of Fame season of Fighting Irish Preview. And now, your host, Phil Houck.
Revival. Just a few weeks ago, Riley Leonard became the subject of intense disdain following the upset loss to Northern Illinois. A waste of NIL was the cry, and bring on Steve Angeli the plea. But since that game, Leonard has played some pretty good football. Let's look at the numbers he has compiled since that dark day. 60 of 86 on his passes, giving him a completion percentage of 69.8%. That's good. That's Notre Dame historically good. 6 touchdown passes. That's also pretty good, and he hasn't thrown an interception. He's rushed for 326 yards on 46 carries. That's 7.1 yards per carry. And he has run for 7 touchdowns with a total of 8 for the season. Most importantly, since the loss to Northern Illinois, Notre Dame has gone 4-0 and remain on track to achieve every team's regular season goal, a berth in the college football playoff. After some anxious moments against Stanford last Saturday, the Irish scored on 7 of 8 possessions. Leonard was accurate, and the offense was diverse. He hit 9 different receivers, tossed 3 touchdown passes, and ran one in himself. The running game, featuring TD runs from Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, and Aeneas Williams, was explosive. The 2024 defense has never been in doubt, but now the Irish offense has the look of a unit that is close to becoming formidable. Diversity and reliability, explosive runs, and a dual-threat quarterback that causes nightmares for opposing defenses. Since that dark September day, Notre Dame is averaging over 42 points per game, and Riley Leonard, once dismissed as a wasted scholarship recipient, is playing some outstanding football. And the Fighting Irish, led by Riley Leonard, after being written off after week 2, are on track for a good old-fashioned revival. Guadalupe's Mexican Grill, now with locations on Illinois, Leo, and DuPont Roads, in Georgetown Square, and in the Allen County Memorial Coliseum. Guadalupe's food made fresh. Now, stay tuned for Fighting Irish Insight from America's foremost authority on Notre Dame football, Tim Priester, publisher of IrishIllustrated.com. Fighting Irish Preview is brought to you by the accounting firm of Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba, Shear McCulloch Auctioneers, Notre Dame Federal Credit Union, where you bank does matter, and Flight by Yingling. 2.6 grams of carbs and 95 calories. It's the next generation of light beer. This is Fighting Irish Preview.
The University of Notre Dame exemplifies dedication to hard work, integrity, and personal values, which result in success in the classroom and on the football field. The professionals at Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba, like Notre Dame, know the same dedication, and their experience and expertise provide peace of mind for you and your business. Tax planning, tax compliance, auditing, business valuation, and estate planning, the full-service accounting firm of Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba, like the Irish, has what it takes to help you achieve success. Located in Fort Wayne near Jefferson Point, Haynes, Eisenbarger, and Skiba proudly supports Notre Dame football and congratulates all those who are a part of the greatest tradition in all of sports. Go Irish!
Flight by Yingling is the next generation of light beer. For those who don't follow trends, but craft them. Flight by Yingling is 12 ounces of uncompromised refreshment from America's oldest brewery. With only 2.6 grams of carbs and 95 calories, this is premium refreshment 6 generations in the making. Don't just raise a glass, raise the bar. Flight by Yingling. Available wherever beer is sold. DG Yingling and Son Incorporated, Pottsville, Pennsylvania. Please enjoy responsibly.
Now back to Fighting Irish Preview with your host, Phil Houck.
Well, Tim Priester, a 49-7 win, some anxious moments early, but total domination the rest of the way. Irish scored on 7 of their next 8 drives after falling behind. The defense held Stanford to just 200 yards. Maybe Stanford's not very good, but I think you would agree that was the best performance of the Irish this year. What were you most impressed with?
I was most impressed with the way that Riley Leonard just came out throwing the football. You know, and earlier in the week, Mike Denbrock had said to us that he felt like he was ready to take a next step. And but of course, he's watching practice every day, and we aren't. And Riley Leonard just came out in the term that I always use. It was just grip it and rip it. He wasn't thinking about it. He wasn't measuring every throw. He saw an open receiver, he just let it fly, and he played with a lot of confidence. And frankly, if that's the way he's going to play the rest of the year, if he's going to play with that kind of confidence, then some really good things are ahead for Notre Dame.
Well, I would note that you did write in the week before the Stanford game that Mike Denbrock seemed to have been unusually confident in how well his quarterback was playing in practice, and that had given you confidence. And sure enough, Riley Leonard played his best game. Now, Tim, let's break down Riley Leonard's game a little bit. What is he doing now? What is really better about his game now that he wasn't doing the first few weeks?
Well, the accuracy was better, and there are times where his mechanics get a little wacky on him, and he'll slide down and throw a sidearm, which is something that Mike Denbrock told us this week drives him crazy. But when Riley Leonard threw with that arm slot, he was very accurate. He threw a couple slant touchdown passes, and so it was mainly, back to my original point, it was just a level of confidence by him. Where he wasn't worrying about the result of the throw. He just had confidence it was going to be there. He's got a good group of receivers. He has tight ends that he can use as well. It was just him, playing with a very confident frame of mind, a frame of mind in which he believed he was going to be successful. And I just think that if he does that, this is going to be a very difficult offense to stop because of what they can do in the ground game as well.
Yeah, well, first of all, about that arm slot, it works for Patrick Mahomes, so why not for
Riley
Leonard?
It works for him, but I think to the detriment of many people that watch him play, unfortunately.
No doubt, no doubt, and I feel the same as the father of two quarterbacks. and I've gone to 100 camps on quarterback play. That arm slot annoys me a bit too, but it was working. He just, what I was perceiving was there was just no perceived hesitation in his release. When he saw the receiver, he threw the ball. Prior to that, in the first couple of weeks, we would see some hesitation there. So definitely playing with more confidence. Well, let's stay with the offense. I was a bit surprised in this game when I saw Jadarian Price receiving I think every carry in the first couple of series, definitely maybe every carry in the first quarter. Tim, Jeremiah Love has been the better of the two guys. I mean, statistically and I think every other way. So why did the Irish force feed Jadarian Price in this game?
That's a good question, Phil. I'm not sure that I definitely have the answer. Price had been benched the game before 2 weeks earlier against Louisville when he had a fumble. I don't know. Maybe it was to try to get his confidence back, or for them to show confidence in him. Maybe Jeremiah Love was nicked up a little bit. I don't know. It isn't anything that we've really gotten a definitive answer on, but it's a 1-2 punch. They're both certainly capable, and I certainly would expect that Jeremiah Love becomes the feature guy once again this weekend when they play against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, he's just a little more explosive. I don't think there's any doubt. But as far as last week's game go, all's well that ends well. Jadarian Price line 12 carries, 49 yards, 1 TD. Jeremiah Love had the longer TD, 39 yards. He had 6 carries for 53 yards. And I think in snap count, they were almost identical as it turned out. It was just how the thing started. Also in that perplexing category is no receptions and no targets in this game for Mitchell Evans. You mentioned how good the receivers are, and you even mentioned the tight end room. Eli Raridan did have 1 catch in the game. That's the only tight end catch in the game. Is this just a function of Mike Denbrock's offense, that tight ends are just not going to be as involved as they would have been in years past?
I don't know about that because Denbrock will be the first to say that he calls the play and then ultimately the quarterback decides where it goes. But he did mention, that the defensive ends for Stanford were guys that they wanted a big body on, and so they chose to use Mitchell Evans as more of a blocker in that game, and he was really good. He was really good in line, and he was really good upfield as well. So, I'm not going to read too much into it. I don't think Mitchell Evans is still at 100%. It's still been less than a year since he tore his ACL. One of these days, he's going to break out, but they've got some weapons there. Cooper Flanagan was banged up a little bit, and he's rounding back into shape, and Eli Raridan scored a touchdown. So I don't want to read too much into it because, there was a lot of money and effort put into rebuilding a wide receiving core. And we saw Greathouse do some stuff downfield, Collins, and Jaden Thomas had the touchdown with Chris Mitchell as well. So just distributing the wealth.
Well, and again, when it comes down to it with that offense, all's well that ends well, and that offense was potent last week. Okay, biggest news this week was the unfortunate season-ending injury to All-American cornerback Ben Morrison. I got to be honest, I almost cried, but there's no crying in journalism, so we move on. We'll, of course, cover all the injury news in the second segment, but Tim, how big of a loss is this, and how do the Irish compensate? I think they're getting, and I think you'll agree, they're getting razor thin at that position, but there's still plenty of talent.
Yeah, they really are. The margin for error is reduced by that much more. The good thing is that you have a couple of guys in Jordan Clark, the nickel, that can play some corner, and Rod Hurd, the safety, that can play some corner. But I really think that this is a nickel game against Georgia Tech, so I think Clark will be playing that mainly. But Leonard Moore, we heard some really great things. Al Golden sent some really great things that you can read on Irish Illustrated about Leonard Moore. I mean, he's just very mature. As soon as he came in, they knew that they had somebody special. And so to be able to insert him into the starting lineup, not saying that they're not going to miss Ben Morris, and of course they are, but if Leonard Moore can play, he was really good against Louisville in his first start. If you can do that against their receiving core, you can do that against Georgia Tech's receiving core, which is excellent as well. Not as deep, but Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton Jr. are really, really good. So, yeah, it's the margin for error is getting slimmer, but the silver lining for Notre Dame is that they have a guy as adept as Leonard Moore, the freshman, to insert in place of Ben Morrison.
Yeah, a freshman, no doubt, but he's a very promising, but a lot of pressure on him as a freshman to perform. So you wrote this week, or Irish Illustrated wrote this week, an article about a walk-on, Max Hurlman, who's been returning punts and done quite well out of Colgate. So can he play corner?
Actually, I asked him what he was playing, and he said nickel, which could work as well. He's been, I believe in this kid. I think that he's the best punt returner on the team. He's excellent on the coverage teams. And so, if you wanted to slip him in at nickel, and I don't know where he is in the pecking order, but that would give you some flexibility, especially with a guy like Jordan Clark to play some corner. Rod Hurd also is a nickel that could bounce in there or play corner as well. So I believe in Max Hurlman. Had an opportunity to speak with him for the first time. Thoroughly impressed with what we see of him on Saturdays, and then in the interview room, I wouldn't put anything past him. He said he had some friends that didn't think that he was making the right decision by choosing Notre Dame. And I said, well, have you called him and asked him, how do you like me now? And he laughed and said no. But I wouldn't put anything past Max Hurlman contributing in another way, and that's certainly his intention.
Well, go to irishillustrated.com and you can read all about him. It's just a terrific story and what he's accomplishing. And hey, I would like our chances if he's in there at corner. I suspect he can probably play pretty well at nickel or whatever he seems to do. He seems to excel at. Okay, a really good day last week, Tim, for Riley Mills and Howard Cross. They had 4 tackles each, Cross with 2 sacks, Mills with 1. What was really cool about Cross's 2 sacks was they both came on it was kind of the rare feat of both coming on the same drive. That you don't see that too often. So are they about to hit their stride? They were expected to be dominant earlier in the season, hadn't quite been there. But last year they hit their stride. Looking forward, do we think it's going to happen now that these two are going to be really dominant the rest of the way?
Well, more importantly, I think Al Golden believes that, and he spoke really highly of him this week. And we saw last year with Riley Mills, he didn't hit his stride till the second half of the season. And now I think his confidence level is up. And then Howard Cross, as we know, started the season. Actually, he was during the summer, he had a hamstring issue that really kind of lingered, and then practice opened and you aggravate it. And so I don't think we've seen the best of him. Maybe last week was the start of that with, as you mentioned, the rarity of 2 sacks in one series. But those guys are the key. Somebody asked us, it was in our podcast this week, about what's the tipping point for the Notre Dame defense with all the injuries. The tipping point is probably if Notre Dame loses, and I hate to speak it into existence, but if Notre Dame loses one of those 2 defensive tackles, because they are the anchors of that Notre Dame defensive line. Fortunately, Gabe Rubio is back. He had 21 snaps. And it looks like he'll be able to have, 25, 30 snaps as early as this weekend.
Well, at the start of the season, it looked like it was going to be a great defense, and it has turned out to be a very good defense. And the thing that I thought that made it better than good defenses of the past had been was that they had so much depth and guys they could keep bringing in. Well, unfortunately, due to those injuries, it's been reduced a bit, but there's still enough there that this can be a great defense. Now, Tim, let's move on from the game a little bit, and let's talk about rankings. Outcry in Notre Dame Nation, and you know what I'm about to get to. Notre Dame drops in the ranking from 11th to 12th after winning dominantly last week. Why is it that this is not the worst? Explain to us, and I've seen your explanation that you wrote about this week, why this is not necessarily the worst scandal in history.
It's funny. We only hear about it. Like, is Notre Dame the only team that the media or doesn't like? Are they the only ones that where there is injustice done to them in the polls? No. What happened was, going into the weekend, Iowa State and Notre Dame had the exact same voting points. They were tied for 11th. Well, Iowa State, which is undefeated in the Big 12, went to West Virginia and beat West Virginia. So they're still undefeated. And it was on the road. I know West Virginia isn't competing for a playoff spot, but Stanford sure isn't either. So I don't really know why we get so wound up about these kind of things. If Notre Dame wins, they're going to be solidly in the top 10, and we'll have a playoff spot.
Yeah, it'll all take care of itself. And it actually, at first I was perplexed, but then you pointed out some pretty logical things. And I also went back and looked at the total votes that they had received, or ranking points. And Notre Dame actually amassed more ranking points this week than they had last week. It just, the way the math came out, because they had been tied the week before. Now, Tim, one last question that's kind of not about the game, but it's about all the games. And I saw some stuff this week, and we see this all the time. We have seen this for the whole lifetime of this program, and it's about Jason Garrett. And I saw one comment that I thought was really over the top. It said, and you're going to almost hate that I say this, and it says, anyone wasting breath defending Jason Garrett as a broadcaster has to be on the take from NBC Sports. As Notre Dame's color commentator, he's awful, and every neutral party you'll find agrees. Well, Tim, I'm not a Cowboys fan, okay, but I think the guy is a pretty good analyst. I just do. I get good stuff from him. How do you feel about Jason Garrett?
Well, I cited 4 instances, just 4. I could cite a dozen comments from last week where it was either spot on or spot on / prophetic, because something happened on the very next play. He predicted the 53-yard the 53-yard pass to Bo Collins. Look, people don't like his voice. People don't like the way he looks. Cowboys fans don't like him. We do this for a living. I sit down and listen to everything that he says. And if I think that he says something that's interesting and prophetic, it's included in our Monday Tail of the Tape. I've always done that. I do it with him. Is he the best in the business? Of course not. But he isn't even close. He's not close to being awful. He's got a lot of great insight. If we would stop and listen and actually hear what he's saying, I think we would come to the conclusion that he's not bad at his job.
Tim, I learned so much when I go back and watch the games on TV after having been in the stadium. And Garrett's been one of the better analysts that we've watched over the years. You also mentioned in your column, Thursday Thoughts this week, every single broadcaster since NBC took over the Notre Dame contract that has broadcast the games and the color commentators. Who is your favorite out of all those? And go ahead and name one or two if you care.
Well, I think analyst. I loved Mike Mayock. I thought he gave you some real insight into the game, the X's and O's part, but he didn't take it so far that you didn't understand, or at least I didn't from my background in football. And I don't think this is a rarity. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything negative about Mike Tirico as a play-by-play guy, and he's excellent. I like, for those of us that are old enough, I thought Pat Hayden did an excellent job back in the day when Notre Dame, the contract with NBC started in 1991 and Hayden came along. Now, people didn't like him because he was a USC guy and they said he was biased. He wasn't biased. He was good. He was fun. He had a lot of fun with it. It was insightful. I thought he was great.
Yeah, I like Mike Mayock a lot, and Pat Hayden was good. And you mentioned Mike Tirico. It's hard to go wrong with him as a play-by-play guy, but also another name that I had forgotten did Notre Dame football was Dick Enberg. And you had some nice things to say about him as well. And it's hard not to say positives about Enberg. And I was lucky enough to actually spend some time with him. He was in Fort Wayne for an event a few years ago. A nice man, and I was just like, at the prom with the best girl in the place because he was just a delight to talk to, and what a history he has. And he did Notre Dame football. Thanks, Tim. Coming up, it's the all-time Irish hero, key to an Irish victory, injury report, and the world-famous Irish Illustrated prediction. And during the break, it's the Fighting Irish Fact of the Week, brought to you by Ron Wise and the Wise Insurance Agency. This is the 403rd edition of Fighting Irish Preview.
This is Art Salzberg. I don't speak for a lot of companies, but Shearer McCulloch is a firm that provides a great and much-needed service. As Sharon and I get older, we've been thinking of moving, but frankly, the thought is somewhat overwhelming. That's where Shearer McCulloch comes in with a full-service plan that takes the pressure off. Listen to this. Shearer McCulloch will sell your house, auction the items you don't want to take, then pack everything else and move you. In sports terms, that's a blowout win. Shearer McCulloch uses an international auction platform to make sure your possessions are seen by the right buyers. They'll get top dollar for your special treasures. Shearer McCulloch is highly recommended by leading retirement communities and law firms, plus they're AAA with the Better Business Bureau. Call them at 441-8636. That's 441-8636. They'll make your moving experience easy and profitable. Shearer McCulloch.
The Fighting Irish Fact of the Week is brought to you by our friends at the Wise Insurance Agency. This week's game marks Notre Dame's first ever visit to Mercedes-Benz Stadium, home of the Atlanta Falcons. Notre Dame leads all FBS teams in number of different NFL stadiums played in since 2016 with 12. Call Ron Wise at the Wise Insurance Agency or go to thewiseinsuranceagency.com and get an auto or home quote in less than 5 minutes.
Over the last 190 years, a lot has changed.
But at Yuengling, America's oldest brewery, we're still focused on one thing.
Brewing darn good beer. Yuengling, the oldest brewery in America.
Now back to Fighting Irish Preview with your host, Phil Houck.
This is Fighting Irish Preview. The 12th-ranked Irish are on the road this week in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium to take on Georgia Tech. TV coverage on ESPN starts at 3:30 p.m. South Bend time. And it's now time for the all-time Irish hero, brought to you by the Marina at Lake Gage. Chris Craft, Mastercraft, Vanderbilt, and Premier Pontoons. New and previously owned, we share your boating passion. And today we continue our series on the Notre Dame National Award winners. So far, we've covered Ross Browner and Tony Rice. This week, a player who to this day is still considered one of the most electrifying players to ever wear blue and gold, Raghib Rocket Ismail, winner of the 1990 Walter Camp Award, which is presented to the College Football Player of the Year. Born in New York, New Jersey, and gifted with lightning speed, Rocket Ismail's nickname could not have been more appropriate because Ismail was a threat to go off at any moment and to do so with devastating effectiveness. As a freshman, Rocket played a key role in the 1988 National Championship season. During that season, he returned 2 kickoffs for TDs and caught 2 touchdown passes. In 1989, he famously returned 2 kickoffs for TDs in the same game against Michigan, thus leading the number 1 ranked Irish to victory that day over the 2nd ranked Wolverines. Perhaps the most famous play that he was involved in was a touchdown that didn't count. With less than a minute remaining in the 1991 Orange Bowl against number 1 ranked Colorado, Rocket returned a punt 92 yards for what looked to be a dramatic game-winning touchdown. But the play was nullified on an illegal block-in-the-back penalty, a penalty which to this day I still haven't seen. In his Notre Dame career, Ismail scored 15 touchdowns that had a combined average of 61 yards in length. Tim Leuholtz lined him up all over the field, wide receiver, running back, kickoff, punt return, and every time he touched the ball, the whole stadium would hold their breath with anticipation.
43 years, Phil. I've been doing this 43 years, and I do not believe that there is a faster player in a Notre Dame uniform during that time than Ragib Rocket Ismail. He was big personality. His personality was twice the size of his body. He had a lot of energy and loved life, and he could absolutely fly. And you're right. I mean, Lou Holtz took full advantage of him in the return game, used him in different ways, full house backfield. Remember the 50-yard touchdown run in the Orange Bowl against Colorado that sealed the victory. Not the one that you're talking about with the clipping call, which was hard to swallow. I was on the field right across from him where he caught the punt, and when he took it up the sideline, I think we've talked about this before. The crowd, as I looked at it, kind of looked like they were doing a wave because they saw him coming down the sideline. Unfortunately, was called back.
Yeah, it was called back, but boy, some great memories of Rocket in the stadium. I remember him in 1990 triggering the Irish with a kickoff return against Miami. What a moment that was in the stadium as well. Ismail was projected as the number 1 overall pick in the 1991 NFL draft, but he initially bypassed the NFL and signed with what was then the most lucrative contract in professional football history with the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League. After 2 successful seasons in Canada, he went on to a 10-year NFL career with the Raiders, Panthers, and Cowboys. Winner of the 1990 Walter Camp Award and Heisman Trophy runner-up, another Marina at Lake Gage all-time Irish hero. The Marina at Lake Gage, we love boats, and it's now time for the Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key to an Irish victory. Head coach Brent Key's Georgia Tech is 5-2. Last week, they won a shootout at North Carolina, 41-34. The Yellow Jackets returned for 2024 substantial firepower from last season's outstanding offense that averaged 31.1 points per game and was first in the ACC in rushing. Key to that production was a 4-pack of players: outstanding quarterback Haynes King, 1,000-yard rusher Jamal Haynes, and receivers Eric Singleton and Malik Rutherford, who combined for over 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. And that group of players is at it again this season. Haynes King, who is questionable for the game, is a dangerous dual-threat guy who has run for 6 touchdowns and thrown 8 touchdown passes with just 1 interception. If King can't go, third-year player Zach Pyron is likely to get the start. Pyron is a 60% passer in his career, good for 650 yards and 4 TDs with 4 interceptions, does have some running skills. Running back Jamal Haynes is averaging 5.6 yards per carry and has scored 7 touchdowns on the year so far. Last week against North Carolina, he put the game on ice in the closing seconds with a 68-yard touchdown scamper. Receivers Singleton and Rutherford are, as I said, at it again. They have already combined for 70 catches, 908 yards, and 4 touchdown catches. Defense was Tech's Achilles heel in 2023. They ranked among the worst in the nation in most major statistical categories. A retooled defensive staff for 2024 has had a positive impact. After giving up nearly 30 points per game in 2023, that average is down to 20.6, and total defense is down more than 100 yards per game. One area the Yellow Jackets still look vulnerable is against the pass. They are 104th in passing efficiency defense and have only picked off one pass. Tim Priester, what is the Aspen Mortgage key to an Irish victory?
Well, we could probably say whether Haynes King plays or not, but let's set that aside and say that he does, but he's not 100%. If they have to go to their backup, that is significantly going to impact their passing game. So I think I look at it from this perspective. The only thing that can beat Notre Dame here is really, I think, if they aren't sharp in the special teams, they could get hurt because Georgia Tech blocked a field goal and a punt in the Syracuse game. They also recovered an onside kick, only something freakish. As I look at this in the special teams, is going to cause a Notre Dame loss this weekend.
All right, we'll watch for that with a little bit of bow as to whether Haynes King plays, but watch for the special teams. Notre Dame needs to be sharp in their special teams, and those are Tim Priester's Notre Dame Federal Credit Union keys to an Irish victory. And Tim Priester, who is this week's Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key player for the Irish?
I'm going with Riley Leonard. I think this is another great opportunity for him to throw the football. You mentioned the stats for Georgia Tech. I think when you look at their nickel back, and they have a really quality linebacker in Kyle Eford, but he's not good in pass defense. I think Notre Dame, just like against Stanford, they will be able to set up the run with the passing game, and I like Riley Leonard to have a big game.
All right, look for that. Riley Leonard is your Notre Dame Federal Credit Union key Irish player this week. Notre Dame Federal Credit Union, where you bank does matter. And it's now time for the injury report, brought to you by Indiana Physical Therapy. Your choice for physical therapy now with 21 Indiana locations. Tim, how are the Irish health-wise going into Game 7?
Well, if I mentioned all the guys that are previously hurt, Phil, we'd be here for a while. But added to the list, of course, is Benjamin Morrison, and he's out for the rest of the season. They hope to have Mitch Jeter back for this game. If not, Zach Yoakum does some kicking. He's handled kickoffs before, and handled most of the extra points, or I guess all the extra points last week. But those are the main two. Billy Schrouth probably not ready to come back. The Notre Dame's right guard. We expect Jordan Faison to be back in action. Cooper Flanagan was last week, and a big one that was in action last week as well, Gabe Rubio. They need him on that interior defensive line.
Okay, one step forward, two steps back in the injury department, and that is your Indiana Physical Therapy Injury Report. And it's now time for the world-famous IrishIllustrated.com prediction. Brought to you by SES Environmental. Need help navigating environmental risk and with regulatory compliance? You need SES. Look them up at sesadvantage.com. Tim Priester, Vegas says the Irish by 11. That line's been bouncing around a little bit. So what does America's foremost authority say?
That line started out at 6.5 and went up to 11.5, and it's all based upon Haynes King's injury. I think Zach Pyron I've seen him. I think he can do some things in the running game, but he's not going to be able to duplicate what Haynes King has been doing in the passing game. Really like Malik Rutherford and Eric Singleton Jr. at wide receiver. They've got a converted wide receiver that plays tight end, Avery Boyd. They do some really creative things, and they have made some plays defensively. But I think Notre Dame is ready to go on a bit of a roll here. I don't want to underestimate what a great coach Brent Key is as an underdog. They've won 9 out of 16 games straight up. They've won outright as an underdog 9 out of 16 times. So they're dangerous, but as I've said before, they're dangerous with Haynes King in the lineup, and we don't expect him to either be in the lineup or to be 100%. I have Notre Dame 34, Georgia Tech 20.
Notre Dame 34, Georgia Tech 20. That is Tim Priester's world-famous IrishIllustrated.com prediction. Tim, and we're going to be close again. ND's improving offense should be able to score points on Tech, and ND's defense, even without Ben Morrison, should be able to slow down a very good Tech offense, especially if Haynes King's injury keeps them out of the game. So the Irish are going to score points. I'll take the Irish, Notre Dame 34, Georgia Tech 24. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Phil.
Go Irish. And thanks for listening to Fighting Irish Preview. Special thanks to Jim Shovelin, Brett Rump, Art Salzberg, and studio producer Adam Schenkel. Fighting Irish Preview is the copyrighted property of Judge Phil Productions. For more Fighting Irish Preview, look us up at fightingirishpreview.com.
Podcasts by Federated Media.